Okay, cool. So thank you everybody for being here today on this first iteration of the workshop for common sense reasoning and knowledge bases. We're really thrilled to have you here for the program that we've put together to talk about some of the most, I think, exciting and pressing topics in this area. And this, organizational effort was done by some of the great people you see on video right now. Lorraine Lee, Bill Lynn, Vered Schwartz, with a tiny bit of work by myself once in a while as well. I guess just to start, I kind of just want to, get some logistics things out of the way. A lot of the workshop that we're running today in terms of being able to ask questions is going to be able to be done over Zoom. But at the same time, for certain components, we've kind of set up some infrastructure to sort of help you keep track and ask questions and have discussions and hopefully actually have a lot of discussion that can remain persistent across time even after the workshop is done. So here's just a few QR codes that you can use to get access to the Slack if you haven't done so yet, as well as another one to see the workshop website very quickly for some descriptions on what the workshop topic was about, and as well as more information about the speakers, the panelists, and the accepted papers. But hopefully you've all been able to kind of snap a pic at this point. So let's kind of get to why we're really here in the first place. Over the last few years, we've seen kind of a tremendous advance in, many different areas of AI, ranging from the applied, such as health, to some of the more kind of general AI capabilities we imagine in tasks such as computer vision and NLP. But the real question that we're all kind of working from nowadays is how do we take this to the next step? What is it going to take for the next generation of AI systems that we want to build to actually be able to accomplish the goals and tasks that we as humans want them to be able to do to really augment our existences. And so the theme of this workshop is what is needed to actually achieve these future advances, and specifically keeping with the theme of the conference, how does it fit into to how we design knowledge bases for the types of AI systems that we're actually interested in building. There's been a huge hubbub over the last few years on these large language models, which have now in some places been renamed foundation models. What role do those types of systems play in the future of AI as potential knowledge representations, particularly in the domain of common sense? And how does that compare with kind of our more classical paradigms of representing knowledge in, let's say, knowledge graphs or other types of symbolic systems? And the same ideas extend to reasoning. While symbolic reasoning was the the most common approach to actually trying to aggregate information and weigh the pros and cons of it in order to reach a decision, over the last few years there's been this major shift towards purely neural approaches. Now there's a big discussion on finding the right way of combining these two paradigms of AI in order to get something better, and really kind of focusing on what role can structure play and how machines are going to understand the world in the future. And so today, to hopefully answer some of these questions, I think we've put together a pretty tremendous program, at least in my opinion, with people that come from very diverse backgrounds and who have some very unique views on many of these topics. So to begin, we have some tremendous speakers here today. First, you'll hear from Sarah Hooker from Google Brain, who's done some great work in learning what neural networks actually represent inside their weights and the types of interactions that you find when you start making changes to those representations. Then you hear from Martin Sapp, who's been designing common sense systems to improve social AI for the last few years, and really has some interesting takes on how common sense is really the foundation of how you actually build socially aware AI systems. We'll hear from Rachel Redinger from the University of Maryland, who's has some groundbreaking takes on how you can actually take some of the most complex forms of reasoning that don't actually lend themselves to kind of classical symbolic approaches that we know, but that need the uncertainty of neural approaches, and how you can actually work within that framework. And then finally, we'll hear from Sean Wren, who is kind of one of the best people at how you can actually integrate structured approaches to common sense representation with knowledge graphs with neural systems to try to get them to do some very interesting things. And then, we'll hear from those 4 speakers, and they'll be joined on a panel this afternoon by these 4 great researchers in common sense areas: Mohit Bansal from the University of North Carolina, Greg Durrett from UT Austin, Samir Singh from UC Irvine, and Ida Nematzadeh from DeepMind, who all work at different points on the common sense stack to actually improve AI systems with these capabilities. And then in addition to these great speakers and panelists, we also are going to have 2 lightning talk sessions where you'll hear about 18 papers that we accepted as part of the workshop this year. We were really impressed by the quality of the work that was submitted to the workshop. So we actually ended up accepting almost every paper simply because of the incredibly strong works that we saw. Most of the reviews that we got were tremendously positive. So, we had a real program committee and ended up accepting 18 papers. There's only going to be around 2 minutes to present each paper during the lightning talk session. But what we've done in the Slack channels is that we've actually set up a specific channel for each paper. So if you have questions about a particular piece of work that's shown, you can definitely start the discussion in there. And the authors should be in those channels to be able to answer those questions either in real time or over the next few days. Like I said, we're really hoping that the Slack workspace can actually remain a persistent ecosystem for a lot of these discussions to be pursued even beyond the workshop after. And so we'll have in the second session, we'll have another set of 9 papers that are discussed as well. So that's what the schedule looks like for today. And so, I don't want to take up too much more time since I'm probably the most boring part of the program today. The last thing that we'll hear about is some closing statements from Vered at the end of the workshop, who will, recap what we talked about today, what the speakers spoke about, and what the panelists paneled. And then we will, hopefully have some goals for what can happen in the future in the space. So without further ado, I am, super excited to invite our first invited speaker to kind of take control of the screen.